Welcome to the Soul Patch Podcast, the podcast where three American expats explore different topics related to living and working in South Korea. With a combined 50 years of living experience in Asia, there are plenty of stories to tell. So, pop in your AirPods and make yourself comfortable. It's time for the Soul Patch Podcast. I'm on these like Facebook groups. And so right after Chuseok, I saw a whole bunch of people posting about having dinner with their in-laws and like the making food sounds, right? And complaining about food sounds, which for me, I'm food sounds, right? Like chewing or like slurping noodles or something like that, and kind of yeah. and
the soju noise. You gotta do that one.
I mean, I have pretty thick skin when it comes to this stuff, so it doesn't bother me or whatever. But a lot of Americans, I think, are kind of sensitive to that, and we're kind of trained as kids, like don't chew with your mouth open, stop, be quiet, don't make food noises or whatever. You get scolded or whatever.
What's funny about this specific one is this is one that I actually do. It's on my list of things that I ask my students, and it's funny watching a conversation because there's a couple of things on this list that I ask students, and this is one of them where every time when I ask students, like, is it polite, normal, polite, or normal, impolite, polite to make these noises when you're eating, students always say, don't do it, this is rude, we shouldn't make noises, and yet this is something that is semi-common in Korea as well. I think there's a couple of things that the younger generations are already, like, they know that it's impolite, or they know that it's something that they shouldn't do, and I don't really see young kids doing it so much.
Like, I could never imagine a young couple, like a young woman or a young man slurping noodles on a date.
Ramen, like, on a date, no.
Okay. Yeah, ramen is a little bit separate category.
Ramen's a whole separate thing. Like, I mean, you see TV advertisements for ramen, and it always shows the person like slurping their noodles. I think
that pisses me off. I freaking hate that. I know. I don't know why, but I always complain about it when it's on TV. When it's just like especially like when they're doing like home shopping and they're selling kimchi and they like squeeze it and it kind of like oozes out and that's supposed to be enticing, and then they're
I don't know that
slurping. You've never seen
the
that?
Slurping noodles. I don't know. I'll have to admit, for the slurping noodles, I kind of half eat my ramen that way now.
You're a slurper.
You're Korean.
For the ramen, I am.
Kevin the slurper.
Definitely.
Oh God. Yeah. Get out, slurper.
For the other food noises, no. I'm very, very against all of that as well. That shit drives me crazy. But the ramen one is one that I've become Korean for that.
Yeah, well, because
I read an article. It was a few years ago. A friend of mine from high school sent it to me, because it was like, it was this running kind of joke about him, because he hated the sound of people chewing food just in general. It was a thing that he had like an aversion to it. Like it would kind of freak him out. It was like really upsetting.
Like a phobia,
just the sound
almost, or something, right?
Yeah, like this. So anyway, the article that he had sent was like his aha moment. It turns out it's like a certain percentage of the population is predisposed to it. It's not just like a phobia that's like acquired. It's like it's a thing that some people are predisposed to, is this like, I want to call it like a visceral reaction or something to this sound.
Like a nausea.
There's some people that hate it naturally, and there's some people that are okay with it.
Yeah,
weird.
It's like it's like cilantro. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just thinking.
It's like 20% of the population. It's like tastes like dish soap, or something.
Right.
But 80% like it.
The rest of us can't live without it. Belongs on the top.
One of the best things ever. There's a Mexican place in Itaewon now, and they've got a big like warning on the menu. It's like, we put cilantro in our food. If you don't like it, get the F out.
Yeah.
I love that place. I think this is a good place to start, actually, if we're going to talk about etiquette, because although there's so many different etiquettes, types of etiquette, different polite behaviors. I don't really know what the correct verb or noun for this is, whatever.
Yeah.
There's so many different things that we can easily talk about, right? We can talk about things that you do on the bus, on the subway, in public, in the library, wherever. I mean, there's swimming pool etiquette, right? There's etiquette for everything. But I really think a great place to start is with eating and drinking, because every culture just has food and drinking etiquette. You know, I mean, we were raised as kids that you don't put your elbows on the table, right? Shit like that. But and I don't know if this is true, like in terms of numbers. I have no idea how to count, you know, specific etiquette behaviors that exist across countries. But to me, it feels that Korea has more. Like there's more individual actions that you should or should not do in Korea than there are things that I learned as a kid to do or to not do at the table.
And I think it goes right along with the language too, like all the built-in, you know, honorifics of how you address.
Well, not so much
older.
the language. I think it goes with the age, the Confucianism, which I think the language is a reflection of that.
Oh, okay,
and I think
sure.
the etiquette is also.
Okay, so, right.
I mean, we're on the same page there, but
it's the language is maybe a symptom of a deeper structure thing.
Yeah, I think the language is a symptom in the same way that the etiquette is a symptom of, but the root cause is probably the Confucianism and the way that they view elders and things like that.
And so it does affect the food, the way people eat, and it also affects the way people speak and the language, and and the way people greet each other.
Of these food examples of these things that, and I ask my students every semester, it's a really fun discussion of what should you and what should you not do when you're eating or drinking. Like imagine that you're eating with your grandparents and imagine that you're drinking with your boss. And that's how I phrase it, because when they're just eating among friends, there's etiquette, you know, don't use your phone, don't make noise, there's those basic things. But really when I ask them like, what should you do when you're with your grandparents? Immediately that just sets off a whole list. There's so many random small things that they should or should not do, right? And it's all age. It's 90% of them at least are age based, things that you should or should not do with elders.
I mean, can you think of anything that you like as far as eating, like a Thanksgiving dinner, that you wouldn't do in front of your grandparents that you would do in front of your parents or anything? I mean, I can't think of really anything.
Like with friends, even like
I don't think there's a lot that's age different with like parents to grandparents, but you know, coming close to like friends, like with friends, if I'm out for dinner with friends and you know, like especially here if you're out for like barbecue or something, that's what I'm just picturing, you know, like eating, I might be wearing a hat. If I wear a hat, I don't take it off here. But if I'm in America, I always take off my hat at dinner. Maybe it's a Wisconsin thing, you know, maybe
it's a Minnesota thing too. Yeah, it's just it's impolite.
Hat at dinner.
Yeah. Don't wear your hat at dinner.
It's like wearing a hat in church. You don't wear a hat in church. You don't do it.
Right.
So it kind of goes
school also, we had teachers like tell you to take off your hat.
Oh yeah, that's right. In school, there were, I think in high school we couldn't wear hats.
Once you get to university, then I think I've said this before. In university, you're a real person. And so the teachers don't really care too much. I did have some professors that cared in uni. Most didn't, but in high school, definitely. In high school, you're not a real person yet. So you take off your hat.
So that would be different. Like at home for dinner time, if my parents weren't there, maybe they're out for the night and it's me and my sisters. If I'm wearing a hat, I don't take it off. But you know, and I'm one of the younger ones in the family, so you know, it's not directly age. But if we're sitting down as a family, mom and dad are there, or some adult, then I would. Yeah. And I would feel the same now. Like if I was sitting down with my parents and I had a hat on, I don't really wear a hat much, but if I had one, I would be taking it off at dinner.
I'm just trying to think if my brother and I wonder if we even use silverware in plates, in plates, you know.
Viking dinner.
It's just a free.
But it's also not an age. It's not an age directional thing either. It's not like grandpa gets to wear a hat.
Yeah, that's true. Because it would be rude for him. I mean, he would consider it rude for him to wear a hat too, right? I mean, he's like, just do as I do.
It's universal. Yeah, so it doesn't have the ageism is that what you call it, or Confucianism, like,
Right.
embedded
That's
in it.
one, I guess an easy example of that to start off with Korean eating and drinking is who eats first, right? Students always tell me that that grandparents, that older people should eat first here in Korea, right? And like you always let the older person start eating, basically, like because here, you know, you're at when you go to most Korean restaurants, the food is it's communal food, right? There's some of it's just a big ass plate for everyone to eat. So the plate, everything gets set, and you wait for the oldest person. They pick up their chopsticks, they pick up their spoon. Once they dig in, then it's okay for everyone else to dig in, right? And so that's very Korean style. And whenever students tell me that, I'm like, okay, well, in the States, we don't care about who eats first, but there is a similar culture thing as well. It just doesn't follow age. It's that if you go to a restaurant, if the three of us went to a restaurant, because American style food isn't a big communal food. It's, you know, I'm going to order my dish, Ryan, you're going to order yours, Jack, you're going to order whatever you want. We're each going to get our own individual things. And if my dish comes first, I'm going to wait.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to wait until all three of us have our food at the table. And then once all three of us are together, you've got your food, you've got your food. Cool. Now we've all got our food. Now you can go ahead and start, you know, or there's that common thing where you'll be out and like, I'll get my food first. And Jack, you'll be like, oh, just go ahead and start. Don't worry about it. Right?
Yeah.
That's a
You
very
give
common
someone the permission, but yeah.
So there is a rule on all of these are unwritten rules, but it's a rule of who should eat first or when you should start eating. But in Korea, it's based on the oldest person eating first, and in the States, at least, it's based on more everyone eating at the same time. In this specific example.
Oh, that's a good example. I like that. Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, my own experience is if I go to my mother-in-law's house, she kind of puts the meat on my plate and tells me to start eating, you know? So it's
I think there's a big difference between mother-in-laws and going out to dinner with your boss.
Right.
I think
Okay, true. Yeah.
Because I mean, mother-in-law, like I've often joked that Koreans are the Italians of Asia, and you know, the mother-in-law is the one that's like, eat more, eat.
Yeah.
And so they just throw food on your plate and like demand you start eating it. They don't want you to wait at all.
Right.
So there is that. But if you were to go out to dinner, like the first time, if you met your in-laws the first time and you were out in a restaurant when you first met them, then definitely like by protocol, you probably should wait for your soon-to-be future in-laws to eat first before you would eat.
That's true. Yeah. The thing for me is I could count on one hand the number of times I've actually gone out to eat with the boss. Like it wasn't that many times.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of like at the time what I did, but I think I've always been just kind of I would always just kind of sit back and observe, you know, and just don't do anything. You know what I mean? Like
don't do anything.
If you don't do anything, you can't offend anyone. You know what I mean? And so I was just kind of paralyzed by like
rule.
Yeah. So I don't think I ever really like learned the proper rules. Like what you're describing right now is really interesting because I don't know if I did that properly or not, but I'm pretty sure that I just waited until other people were eating, and then I'll start eating. But I wonder if a lot of people probably feel that same way, you know, they're just
and I do think, of course, that I mean we're allowed, any foreigner in any country is allowed to break these simple etiquette rules. I'm sure you guys have stories. I've got a great story. I've got great examples of breaking these rules where I didn't know that I was breaking it and I totally slaughtered whatever this small rule was. And the people around me, like, you know, they're totally not angry. They're not even disappointed. They're just like, oh, right, silly foreigner. They don't know the rules, and it's not
you get the foreigner pass.
Yeah, I've got a pretty bad one actually. This one is.
Do we want to stare one of these stories each? I've got a great one. It's just really fun.
I definitely want to hear yours.
Go for it.
Mine is really fast. This is a Thailand one, but I'm going to jump overseas here quickly to another country, but. In Thailand, it's very impolite. There's like feet are just pointing your feet, putting your feet up towards somebody is like the most disrespectful thing you can do. It's just it's like, you know, 2 middle fingers and, you know, whatever. And I'm a very tall guy. So I remember being on a bus. We're going to some camp and I was sitting in the front of the bus, the front seat. and it has those bars. And as a tall guy, it's much more comfortable if I just put my feet up on these bars. And it happened to be that my feet were pointing right at the bottom of my feet. The soles of my feet were pointing right at the bus driver. Part. Yeah, and another foreign teacher. So the bus driver is steaming. He's just getting mad, and I didn't recognize it at all. I didn't know this, but somebody else, another teacher that had lived in Thailand for a year, saw this guy getting really angry and looked at my feet, and he came over and he just kicked my legs. The foreigner, a friend of mine, we were friendly, but he knocked my feet off, and I'm like, what the hell, man? What He's like, your feet are pointing right at the bus driver, and then I felt terrible. I meant no ill will, but
I wonder if that has some relationship with Buddhism, because I've done a few meditation classes in different countries, including here in Korea. And so when you're in the Dhamma hall, when you're sitting to meditate, you sit, half lotus or whatever. But if your legs get sore, there's nothing wrong with like moving your body, whatever. But they emphasize this in all the classes, and even here, where this isn't a thing. The bottom of your feet is not like a thing, But you don't put your feet pointed towards the front, towards the teacher. So even if you're sitting like this, with your knees up and your toes pointed, the bottom of your feet aren't showing, but your toes are pointed that way. That's considered disrespectful. And then absolutely, you do not put your legs out, which would be like, people do it to stretch if you've been sitting for 10 hours. Yeah. And you show the bottom of your feet, that's absolutely not okay.
It's got to be a Buddhist thing then, because Thailand is, because
I'm wondering.
And this bus was just festooned with like shrines on the dashboard. So he was obviously a practicing Buddhist. So I was basically pointing my feet right at Buddha, just,
man.
F this bus. I hope we crash, it was, I was a total newbie, first couple months in a foreign country ever. And, it was a faux pas, and you got to just kind of go like, all right, I'll never do that again. But, I'm not going to beat myself up over it forever, but it is kind of a weird thing.
And you learned really quick.
Yeah.
Oh, now you remember.
Yeah, it's one. If somebody kicks your legs out from under you and tells you to stop it.
Here's my etiquette story in Korea. Then this is a drinking story, because as we've said, there's a lot of eating and drinking rules, right? And I think there's especially a lot of drinking rules. Things like turning your head when you're drinking, and only pouring with two hands, and things like that. But I don't know if you guys have seen this, because I know you guys don't go out and drink soju with a lot of Koreans very often. So maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but there's a culture thing. There's a thing when you're out drinking where so usually, right, like the older people are above the younger people, right? So they are the ones that drinking first, and you pour for them first, and things like that. So there's this one drinking thing that happens, and I've seen it now a few times, and now I understand the whole idea, where basically an older guy will come up to a younger person, and it's usually always guys. I think there must be older women that go out and like put the Jew down as well, and this could happen there, but it's only happened with me at Odysseys, where basically they'll come up to you with a glass, an empty glass. So oftentimes their empty glass, and the bottle and the bottle of soju, or sometimes a pitcher of beer if that's what you're drinking, but we'll just use soju because it's an easier example. And what they do is they hand you their empty glass. Because remember, you shouldn't pour soju for yourself, right? That's rule number one. So for everyone listening, you never pour soju, you never pour beer for yourself. You always pour for other people.
Or this is just
this specific one? I don't know. That at least the not pouring for yourself. The whole story that I'm getting to.
But water gets a pass. Like you can
water
pour
does.
water.
This is for alcoholic beverages.
Right.
Yeah.
So for alcoholic beverages, just to be clear, because it's a pretty standard rule that you really shouldn't miss. You don't pour for yourself, but water.
You don't pour alcohol for yourself. And there's a lot of fun ways to get around that, though. Actually,
well, you have to if you're drinking alone, but yeah.
Well, even if you're drinking with friends, it's okay to pour for yourself, but then there's ways to still meet the social etiquette thing while like acknowledging it, so it's not actually a rude thing there. But we can get. Sorry, I can tell you a couple of those. No, I love parentheticals. Those are fine. So the culture thing is that normally an older guy will come up to a younger guy, hand you the glass that he's often been drinking from for the course of the night, his empty soju or beer glass, whatever you're drinking, is his empty alcohol glass. And he hands you his glass, and then he will pour soju for you, right? Because you're supposed to take the empty glass and then he pours it for you. Because again, you're not pouring for yourself. And then what you're supposed to do in this situation is you take it and you drink it, and you give him back the glass, and then you switch. And he gives you the bottle, you have the glass, you pour him a drink, and then he takes the shot as well. So you're basically each taking a shot from the same glass. And that's a weird culture thing, right? I can't think of a single thing even remotely close to something like this in the States.
And then you get your COVID test immediately right after that.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting, I mean, a lot of things have changed in terms of COVID stuff. I mean, birthday cakes, blowing on a birthday cake now is just a bad idea. But yeah. So now I understand this, because now I've been in, like, the first time this happened, I was still new to Korea. My Korean was still quite shit. I really had no idea what was happening. So I'll tell you what I did in a second. But the reason for this and the culture thing, it's actually kind of cool. It's because the older person, again, they're generally like above you, for lack of a better word. So what they're doing by bringing their glass for you and pouring a glass for you first, and then sharing a drink, and then having you pour for them, is they're basically coming over and being like, look, we're cool, we're buds, even though I'm higher than you in the hierarchy, we can share drinks, and we're on the same level tonight, right? Like let's have some drinks, and we're chill, right? You don't have to, like, this is me giving you a drink because I respect you as a person, even though you're under me in the hierarchy for here. And that's basically the reason for it. So now I understand it. When they come over and they give me their glass, I'm like, oh, cool, okay, I got it. And sometimes it even gets more, they'll pour you more and more, like they'll fill up your glass like to the fucking brim, and they're like, this is how much I love you. Like the more they like you, the more that's just a whole drinking thing. But I've had that happen to me a couple of times as well. So that's what you're supposed to do. So if you're ever drinking with some ajushis and they come up to you and they give you their glass, they give you their glass, and then they pour for you, just take the glass, take the shot, literally then take the shot, drink it, and then switch. And it's not that weird. This is what you're supposed to do.
And they're absolving you from this like formality, essentially,
more or less.
night.
Yeah, they're like, we're on the same page right now. We're on the same level. Let's have a drink and just have fun, right? For this specific instance. And so it's kind of a cool culture thing. Now that I understand it, it really helps me understand like part of Korean culture in general. It emphasizes, it shows how important that hierarchy, that age hierarchy is, and how you can break it in some ways, and how they can acknowledge it. And it's a really cool insight. I love these type of etiquette things because they're amazing insights into the country, into the culture, rather. It's a very cool insight. And this is one of my favorites. So the first time this happened to me, I was, again, I'd only been in Korea I was less than a year, I think, at this point. Yeah, I was still living. Yeah, I was definitely less than a year. So I was new, and I was out drinking I went to this, like, it's not important. It was me drinking with a bunch of ajushis, a bunch of Korean ajushis. It was only me and a bunch of ajushis. They were all older than I am. And it was just soju all night. And I was attempting to speak broken Korean at the time. My Korean was terrible. But we were having a good time, like alcohol does make communication easier sometimes at a certain level. And finally, at one point in the night, one of the dudes comes up to me and he hands me his soju glass. And I'm just confused. I'm like, what the why are you handing me your glass? And at this point, I'd been in Korea long enough that I knew that there were rules, right? I knew that rules existed, but I didn't know this one. So I'm like, oh shit, what? Obviously he expects something from me. Like there's something that's supposed to happen here, but I have no idea what it is. And I'm already at least a bottle or two of soju in, so I'm not going to be able to guess what the hell I'm supposed to be doing here.
You didn't bring your rule book that night?
Unfortunately, no, I didn't have my Drink Korea rule book. I should have gotten one.
180 pages.
So, right. So he hands me his glass, and in my mind, I'm doing I'm doing like physics and calculus, like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Oh shit. He hands me his glass, and I take it, and I'm like, okay, I want to be polite. I'm in Korea. He's handing me his glass. I know there's a lot of rules. What do I do? What's the rule here? I take his glass, and in a split second, I make the decision. Okay, and I hand him my glass. I just reach down, I grab my glass from the table, and I just hand it to him. And then he's just looks at it. He's like, why did you just trade me glasses? What is this foreigner doing? And then we each poured into each other's glasses, and then we just took a drink from there. And then he walks back with my glass, and I have his. I'm like, well, now we just changed. This is really strange. I don't understand at all what's happening. But again, so I totally fucked up this rule, like entirely. I broke the entire thing, but there was no way he was angry at me at all.
Right.
He just sat down again, and I think he kind of like laughed to himself, like that was just as awkward as I thought, as he probably thought it was awkward as I thought it was. But then we just continued for the night, and there was no problem. The next day, I asked my friend who I was at this party with, when we all woke up. It was like a camping thing. I asked my friend, like, what the hell was I supposed to do there? And she explained to me. I was like, oh, okay, now I know. And so I slaughtered that rule, but it didn't matter. And now it's a funny story, and now I know it. And it gives me that cool insight into the culture as well. And so I think breaking rules is one of the best things that you can do, as long as you're breaking it while, attempting to not break it, like acknowledging that there is a rule here, and even if you don't know what it is, something exists, and trying to figure out what it is.
Like I didn't understand I remember going to a dinner with my wife's family, and the younger cousin poured his uncle a shot, and then the uncle poured him a shot, but then my wife's cousin turned and he drank it from the side. So I was like, well, I mean, obviously I know that, like, okay, it's rude to just drink, but I've been doing that for the whole duration of the night. I never turned once until I saw the cousin do that. And so I think I asked my wife, and she's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't apply to you. You're a foreigner, it's okay. It doesn't really matter if we, but you kind of want to fit in, right? You want to do it the right way.
I would say a little bit. I think the more Korean you speak, the more these things do matter.
Oh, then I don't have to worry about it at all.
I think because I guess it's like the more Korean you speak, the more you're assumed to understand the country and the culture and things like that, and the more you're kind of in it. And so, like, although I still probably wouldn't matter that much, I've never been told off for not turning my head. But then again, the few times I've gone out to like a proper hueshik, when I went to Dokdo, or when I went to the second time, I was working under this company, and there I was definitely drinking like with the boss a couple of times, and there I definitely turned my head. I don't think they would have said anything had I not. But at that point, I was speaking Korean the entire night, and I think, like, had I not, it might have been strange, even though they probably wouldn't have told me off. It was kind of assumed that I would do it, I guess. I don't know. It just felt natural at that point because I knew what to do. But that is a weird one as well. Turning your head when drinking, like, I know to do it, it still feels weird for me. That's an odd one.
Is there what if we shifted away from, are there anything else you guys wanted to talk about as far as drinking etiquette goes? Did we miss anything?
Any of the table etiquette? Like, I didn't share any stories, but like my experience in the early days of being here and being exposed to a lot of this etiquette, I don't think it's so much like getting the foreigner pass. Like, I think the way I learned about these things, I don't think I ever like sat down to watch a YouTube video about it or something. Like, I'm sure I did not. I'm sure it was explained to me after the fact. So, it's behaviors that you'll see, you don't engage in because you're from a different world. You don't know to do that. And then some of those things you softly start to adapt. So, like, when I came here, seeing people bow, nod their head a little bit, this was a bit odd. That's not normal where I come from. Now I do that. Did I choose to do that? No, I just do it. I don't make an effort to use two-handed gestures, but it's just sort of a natural behavior. When a student hands me something, I might actually receive it with two hands, kind of like I'm not trying.
Have you ever done that back in America?
Empathy. What's that?
I did that at a gas station in the US. I was like, I held my, it's a podcast, no one can see what I'm doing, but I was like holding the wrist, to kind of do that double-handed thing, giving the money. And I'm just like, Oh, that was weird.
I
Why?
bow,
Why did I do that?
bow a lot. I bow a lot when I go back to the States now.
Yeah.
That's the one that's completely
I nod
ingrained
my
in
head
me.
all the time. Yeah. So what I was going to say is like some things, especially for listeners, if you're going to be blasting off to a new part of the world, and if it's the Eastern Hemisphere, you might find yourself in a place like this. Some of those behaviors you're just going to pick up naturally. Yeah, you could probably try to acquire them, but I mean, it's important to be aware of the etiquette of the place you're in, but I think it's also important to remember no matter where you are in the world, people are humans. And if something is terribly important to them, they'll probably try to let you know in a very polite way. You know, it's, yeah, I just don't think it's a life and death thing. And I do see some people overcorrecting. And there is a great YouTube video. I've used it for my students. I show this to them.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
You know exactly what I'm talking about because it's hilarious.
Is it almost like pandering, like to the level of like?
Oh, it's so cringy. It's so cringy, and the students they start crying, laughing when they see it. So it's this girl. I'm not going to name the YouTube channel because actually they make a lot of cool content. They're pretty fun.
What was this sincere or it's a joke YouTube video?
It was sincere. They were trying.
Okay, it's funny.
I'll do the whole setup. I don't have any stories to share myself with like etiquette and stuff. Like I said, I just kind of learned everything after the fact. Yeah. But here's the setup. So in the video, it's a guy and a girl that I think they're from Canada. I'm pretty sure. And he's filming, she's on camera. And it's apparent they're like, it looks like they've been in Korea for 1 month teaching at a hagwon or something in some rural village somewhere. And she's like going to do educational, how to act when you're in Korea. And she's like, when you're in Korea, you want to be polite. So you need to know how to use your hands. You need to know how to take and accept something from someone, like a book, like money. You need to know how to pour drinks. And so she gives a demonstration of like the two-handed gesture, and it looks like she broke her wrist. You know, she's like this, like gripping it. Or like, for the pouring, you have to hold two hands to receive it. And they pour water, of course, which the students think is hilarious, you know, because it's just water. And she's got two hands in the glass. This overpronunciation. And it's a crap.
I've downloaded that video just in case it ever gets taken down.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
So
I got to see this now. This sounds this is cringe city. I love it.
Actually, again, to go back to culture things, do you guys know why they use two hands, or not two hands like this, but two hands like holding their wrist?
I do know this trivia. Do you want to say it or can I say it?
Go for it.
I mean, this is the story that I know. So like, I'm not in the story or anything. It's because of hanbok, right? It's the long sleeve.
Right. It's clothes. Like, because remember, you used to be pouring, like the people who were pouring clothes, like you'd be in some fancy restaurant and the waiter or the probably waitress would be, I don't think they'd use the word waitress either. The whatever.
It's called server, Kevin. You impolite bastard.
In this case, it was definitely female, because this is like a long time ago, right? Where it was like the like, you know, nobles like at the restaurant, at the, you know, imagine the like old school, they're sitting all around the table, they've got their big tall hats on. And so the female servers are pouring, and they've got these, so they're pouring for you. Someone is always pouring for you. You don't pour for yourself. And they've got these long open sleeves, right? And so they're basically holding the sleeve away. And I think that's where a lot of etiquette comes from. It comes from, you know, some like reasonable purpose. And now we don't do it because we have big sleeves anymore. But
I've never heard that. And I never would have guessed that.
I've seen this gesture too, where when someone's doing this and it's overly dramatic, like if they're just being like overly polite, I feel like the gesture actually has, I mean, again, this is for people who are watching on YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about, Kevin, right? Like the hand doesn't just go here. It actually kind of pulls, like you're pulling a sleeve. It's like, I swear, I don't know this. The other one that I'm suspicious of too, regarding hanbok, the Korean clothing, is when people shake hands, it's really common, or like not shaking hands, but doing something with their hand. If you're reaching,
like holding your chest, you mean? Like
holding their chests.
Yeah.
I've heard that it's holding your clothes, like the gap in your clothes, like it'd be like a robe, basically. You're holding it closed as you reach. Not when you're shaking hands, because that wouldn't be a thing, right? It would be like when you go to pour something one-handed. you put your left
That's actually
hand
something, yeah, you can actually
across
kind
your
of like, you
chest.
don't have to do two hand support. You can put one hand on your chest and kind of, it equals
Yeah,
the same thing.
right. So I feel like maybe that's from the same, I don't
The,
call it, not the etymology, but
Yeah, like
the
the
history
history
of
of
it.
it.
I had a weird experience. Like I studied jujitsu for a little while at a gym near my house, and one of the rules was you never, when your belt comes off, you never put your belt back on while facing the teacher, the Sunseng or you always turn away, you tie your belt, and then you come back to face the circle or whatever, the center. So at one time I was so just I'd been, I don't know, choked for the umpteenth time, choked out for the umpteenth time that
Oxygen
night.
deprived.
And yeah, I just was so exhausted. I started tying my belt, and one of the guys, kind of like grabbed my arm. He's like,
Turns
dude,
you.
yeah, turn around. Yeah. But
so you can moon the teacher. You can moon the teacher, but you can't show your dingaling.
I know, right? Yeah, it'd be more disrespectful to show your ass, but I don't know. It's it's interesting how these things start. I mean, I guess that makes as much sense as anything, is that the hanbok was in the way, and so you move it out of the way so that it doesn't dunk into your glass of makgeolli or whatever. So
that's for the pouring one. And so a lot of it, like these small things, it makes sense, and then like there's a lot of age things, or it goes back to that. And again, I mean, we could just list things that you should or should not do at the table, right? I think most of them aren't super important. Like in Korea, it's technically this is an interesting one. It's bad to lift up your rice bowl. I'm sure you've heard that before. Like your rice bowl should stay on the table. But this is something that I ask students. I always ask them, like, do your family really care about that one? And I get like 50-50. Like some families do care and some families don't about lifting the bowl.
It's probably like about the equivalent of the hat thing in America, it's like
maybe
50-50.
This specific one, I don't think really matters too much. It's a rule that everyone knows, but in some families care, some families don't. The one that I do think that is important to mention, because again, this is one that I've made this mistake a bunch of times.
Can I guess what you're going to say? Can I guess?
Go for it.
Is don't stick your chopsticks in the bowl, because it looks like the incense that you burn for the ancestral.
It's not because of the incense. It's not because of the incense. Although you're connected that it is the ancestral thing, but it's not the incense specifically. So yeah, for people listening, you shouldn't, if you've got your chopsticks in your hand and you want to put them down. I made this mistake a bunch of times, because for me, it's like, I just want to put my chopsticks down and, take a drink of whatever I'm doing.
I still
so
do
an easy way to do it is
just
just stick them into your rice, because, it's like the sticky rice, and just stick them in there. They're going to stand, and then you can drink or do whatever you want with your hand. And then they're right there for you to easily pick up and start using again. And this is a very rude thing to do. And it does have to do with the ancestral rites, Jack. So you're on the right track, but it's not because of the incense, but the way that, during the Jaesa, during the ancestral ceremony that families do at Chuseok and Seonal here. So I guess your family doesn't do it too much, but we live in the family that we're in the household where it happens. So they set up a huge table of all the food, and all of that food, like we bow in front of it, and that food it's for the ancestors, basically. Like you sit around and wait for a couple of minutes, and it's like, okay, they're here, they're eating right now. And while you're bowing and stuff like that, the idea is that they're hanging out at that point and eating the food. And while they're eating, while you're bowing, you stick the spoon or the chopsticks into the rice for them to use, basically.
Okay.
So it is connected to the ancestral rites, but it's not the incense part specifically. It's because this is how you give it to them. So that means that if you have your spoon just stuck in your rice, that is for the ancestors. This rice is now it's earmarked for them. This is the food that they are supposed to come and eat. Yeah, basically. So that's why you shouldn't do that.
I had actually learned it the wrong way. I learned that it looks like the incense in a bowl, and that you don't want to imitate that. But yours sounds much more.
I mean, I see it every year when we stick it in the rice, and then we bow to the table. I see that specific thing.
Yeah.
So
that's fascinating.
So that's where, that's where that one comes in. And I think that's an important one to share, because most of these, like eating first or lifting up your bowl,
it's just common
not
sense,
turning
almost,
your head. Yeah, most of these don't really matter. And if you break these rules, no one's going to really care. Sticking your chopsticks or your spoon just into your rice, people again, they won't really get offended, and they'll generally just tell you, and they'll be polite, like, or they'll just, I've just had people just reach out and just grab my chopsticks from me and just set it on the table. Just like, no, that doesn't belong there, Kevin. Like, we're not mad at you. We understand you just made a mistake, but no, you don't do that. You know, it's like the way you chide a child. Like, they do something, you just fix them. You don't yell at them. You just like, no, kid, that's not how it works.
Yeah, that
and so
just
this
kind
is
of goes
one,
back to my point. Like, if you end up offending somebody, and I
right,
mean, come on, you're obviously not from Korea if you
right,
are the way we look and acting the way we act. I mean, nobody's confused. Nobody's like, hey, that guy looks like he's from Korea. He must be from Daegu. What is he? He's an idiot. How doesn't he know this? They
how
know
does he not
we're
know?
outsiders. We don't know. So you get a pass and you get some help.
Right. But I do think this
Yeah.
is one that people should know to attempt to avoid this specific one, because this one can be at least slightly offensive. Again, if you make the mistake, no one's going to care.
It's very convenient. It's very convenient. Not just like, well, it's not even if it's rice, but even like back home, if you're eating and you want to, you get in a nice restaurant and you're in the middle of your steak, you can leave your fork on the plate as you take a drink of the wine, right? I mean, it's just, that's normal. You don't take set your fork to the side. So in Korea, it's like, it's where you can park your chopsticks. Like, often you don't have another dish you're eating out of. It's just, you have that bowl. So even if you just want to wedge your chopsticks in there, because that'd just be a normal reaction. That's what you do. If you're eating your mac and cheese, you just leave the fork there. You can drink the milk. But yeah, so I think it's something
that's a lot of dairy. Mac and
quick
cheese
sidebar. How
Wisconsin, man, Wisconsin.
How do you guys feel about the metal chopsticks in Korea? I mean, it's better for the environment. Do you like them? Are you
I grew to love it.
now?
Yeah. Okay. I use them when I'm cooking now too. I like the feeling.
Yeah.
Like the weights.
I mean, it does make you a very skilled chopstick user. I mean, it's like, it's definitely like you're at the high level. You're in the, it's the pro.
I had a Japanese friend of mine many years ago. She came here to Korea, and so I was touring her around, and we went to some Korean restaurants, and we were eating, of course, and she has no problem with the chopsticks. But I remember her commenting on how heavy the chopsticks were. Because Japanese ones are the light wood ones. I prefer wood personally. I like the natural feel of the wood.
Sticks to your lips. Makes me crazy.
Really? I don't have that.
I don't like dry chopsticks.
I do understand. Like the metal ones are fine. I prefer the wooden ones. I like the feel of them in my hands.
I feel fumbly with the wooden ones because they're too big on the end. Are you talking about the disposable ones you crack open? Those ones are so wide.
Like a proper like a wooden set of chopsticks that you can buy. Like proper wooden ones that you own for your own wooden ones at home, not the disposable wooden ones.
So we're talking about two different things. We're talking about like the wooden ones that are like disposable. They soak up so much liquid you can actually kind of taste
those ones suck.
You're talking about like the ones that are like lacquered and smooth, and
like
you get like
proper chopsticks that you would no, those are the ones. Of course I have a bunch of those at home. Like I've got wooden ones, we've got the metal ones.
I like to break the wood, and
that's your style.
Because then I can pick up the last noodle, but with the metal chopstick, that last noodle is not going in my mouth. It's just gonna slide around the bottom of that bowl for infinity until I just pick up the bowl and F it, and just drink it down.
Go for it.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you guys would you guys be cool if we shifted over to just like language? You guys check out that article?
Language etiquette?
I think we talked about this a little bit, but I guess we don't have to get into it, deep, because I think this is a whole other, very complex aspect of the culture. But what do you guys think about, like, as far as like like using the language? Like, I only learned jondaemal, so I've had these like weird experiences where I'm like if I'm talking to kids, I use jondaemal to like a kid, and then the kid's confused because it's like, why is this person showing so much deference to my elementary and I know that I've screwed it up, and I know it's embarrassing, and then I'm just like, and then I get flummoxed, and so I just, with the language, I feel like I've made so many just boneheaded moves that I almost kind of don't want to speak Korean to people. I think
jondaemal is interesting with kids. It's actually not necessarily wrong to use it at all. Like, it's not forbidden to use jondaemal with young people. Oftentimes, like if we're walking down the street or something, and like there's a young kid walking past us, and like comments on our dog, like, "Oh, cute dog," then my wife might reply to the kid using 존댓말, like, right, like sometimes, because it's just like a stranger on the street, and it's kind of like almost teaching them the etiquette as
Oh,
well.
we forgot to
get the
define
language from somewhere.
존댓말 is the highest, almost the highest level of etiquette, right?
Yeah,
Honorific in Korean language.
I don't know about high, because I actually saw something years ago. There's something like 15 different levels of.
Oh, I
God.
thought there were
6.
6.
I don't know.
Yeah, like,
there's a lot.
You have the 2 permutations. You have like, this is my perspective of it, and Kevin, for anybody listening, Kevin is like at least in this room, he is the absolute expert for language. But
In this room,
the way that I always
not,
understood
not the
that you
actual
have,
expert.
well, yeah, I just meant like, you have, for real though. I mean, even for listeners that are curious, we talked about this in another episode, you can go find it, about language. But Kevin, you're easily like in the top 10% of our demographic of people who have spent a similar amount of time.
Yeah.
Like your language skills are pretty good.
Okay, yeah. Decent.
Yeah, take the compliment. Shut up. So
and I mean, and I do live in Korean as well. Like not in Korea, in Korean.
Yeah, he's in a Korean household.
You're immersed in a.
He speaks Korean to the dog. So like
we do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my perspective of it, and again, this is going to be more novice than yours, is that there's like 2 different qualities to the levels of speech. So when I first came here, I first started studying the language, I saw everything as being just like, is it polite or casual? So just like, like, is that was the 2. So either you're being casual.
For people listening, a really quick way to define this is, for polite, you add the syllable yo to the end of the sentence, and that's it.
Yeah.
And for
that's the first thing you learn.
Yeah, just to be safe, just put yo at the end of everything. What's up, yo? Just put the yo there.
Yeah, it's the easiest thing. Yeah, just bolt it on the end. That was one of the first things that was the first way it was described to me. But my impression is that you have both the polite meter on one side, and the other side you have a formality meter. So you can be formal and polite, but not necessarily both are neat. Like you can mix those. It's like 2 different faders on the mixing part. Does that make sense? I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, I can see that. So you're because the situations are so nuanced all the time. I mean, I think that's why I feel so lost all the time, is because it's just second nature for Koreans to know exactly how to fade those two I don't know, switches, like I need this much politeness and this much formality for this perfect situation. And for us, it's like, oh my God, I got to go back to my textbook and, like where, how old is this person I'm talking to? What's my relationship to them? What's the context of the situation?
Kevin, in your brain, with the amount of experience you have, and again, so listeners, Kevin's living in a house with people that are various ages, so he's interacting with people on both, I would say, like a casual level and a polite
I've got
level.
there's younger people, there's younger cousins and older aunts and uncles and in-laws above me.
So in your mind, like, how much are you varying your speech? Do you see like yourself speaking in 2 different ways, 3 different ways?
I've never thought about specific ways, but that's actually learning the whole 존댓말, and there's 높임말, which is like a different version of it. But living and interacting with the in-laws on a day-to-day basis, that like just triple leveled up my Korean ability in terms of dealing with levels. Like Jack, you're saying that you first learned to speak 존댓말 because that's how you practice. And that's the way most of us learn. I was really comfortable in 반말 at first because I only spoke Korean with my girlfriend, fiance, now wife, and of course we use the 반말, the comfortable settings. Once I moved in with the family, now I have to like use all of these different levels, and it's weird. So I know exactly what you're saying. Like, just to give listeners to if you've never had these language things, it's confusing as hell. We'll just try and keep it really short. So there's friend level Korean, and there's even lower levels that you would use for dogs and stuff like this, of different endings basically. But there's friend Korean, where you basically end with no yo at the end of your sentence. Then there's general polite Korean that you would end with just people that you just meet on the street, right? Like the person that you're buying like the soda from at the store, you end your sentence with yo. How much is it? Yo. And I rarely use the amnida form. Like I never use that here at home. That's like news or formal.
I use it
or
to make
something.
jokes. I use it to make
Yeah.
jokes if I want to tease my girlfriend or something.
Yeah, but I mean,
Sounds
and that
good.
makes sense. That's a context thing. But I almost never use that. Actually, I probably never use that in terms of. That's probably the form that I'm the least good
I try to
at.
use that when I'm talking to really old people.
Yeah, no,
I was
that's
like,
not wrong.
old people, I'll use yo, but if they look really old, I'm like, I better throw an imnida in here because I don't want to, make a mistake. But I guess I'm totally off base there.
I don't think that's
matter,
necessarily wrong. But if they're really old, they might even still be like, because there's actually even different. There's another form of speech. I learned this when I was in one of my Yonsei classes a bunch of years ago. I never got good at it. There's a form of speech that if you guys have never studied it, I still have never even heard it or rarely heard it. It's not really used today, but old people still use this form, and it's kind of fading out. And
Like
this is the form that, yeah, kind of. It's the O form, not the yo form, but it ends with the O form.
Is it shipshio?
And shipshio, it's that, and there's other versions of it, but yes, that basically.
Oh, okay.
So that form is pretty much fading away. Like it's the very polite shipshio, that specific context. That's the like, please do this for me, or please do this. But there's other O endings as well.
Yeah. So I had a friend here who was a foreigner, and he had lived here for a long time, and he used this on occasion.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, and honestly, I don't know. My Korean skills not good, but I had been kind of schooled on this a little bit. Like, yeah, it's a thing. You're gonna read it. Like I found it in a book somewhere, and then someone like, yeah, just don't touch this. It's just if you hear it around you, just it's not for you. It's not for you. That was his answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
You break it, you buy it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, don't touch this one. You're not gonna be able to deal with it. It's too powerful for you.
It's too powerful.
Yeah. So my friend was using it. I tried to explain it to him, and he wouldn't hear it. He was like, no, this is very, very polite. But I never got to the root of it, like what it really is. So it's for requests, right?
Well, no, I think the shipshio is that specific one. But that's not the entire form. That's the form is like, it just ends with different O symbols.
Okay.
So the shipshio is that's one ending in the whole form.
That's the same as like shippo, like I want.
No, shipshio is more like do this, like ha shipshio, please do this for me. Not I want this. Not hago shippoyo. It's a different spell. It's completely different from that one.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, don't use this one. I rarely use it. The only time I've used it is when my wife and I are watching some like period drama, and I start because this is where you get it from, is like from that. And so I'm watching with English subtitles because period dramas are like way above my head. But I'm hearing it at the same time. And
would this be the equivalent of like Victorian English or something like that? I mean, like,
maybe more recent than Victorian, but yeah, you can go ahead and put that. It might be more like 1800s, but something like that. Okay. But then again, you don't need this. The really confusing thing for Korean or for foreigners is, so there's the endings, and that's relatively easy, right? If it's a friend, you don't use yo. If it's a random person on the street, you use yo at the end. And if you're watching the news, it's imnida. But to the real mindfuckery is there's different word forms depending on whom you're speaking about, not who you're speaking to. And I'm sure you guys have run into this before, right? So the best example, the easiest example is to say to eat something. The verb is 먹다. Now we're turning this into a language lesson, but that's okay, right? So 먹다 is to eat. But there's also 드시다, which is to eat. It's the exact same word. It's the same meaning. There's also 잡수시다. There's at least another one. There's 2 or 3 eat verbs. Food is important in the culture. And so you use these forms when you're talking to older people. So where it gets really confusing is when I'm talking to my wife, or even if I'm talking to like one of my friends about his mom, right? Like, oh, did your mom have dinner today? I would use the polite form of the verb. So 드시다, I would use that form of the verb with the no yo ending, the banmal ending, because I'm talking to my friend. So because I'm talking about a person above me, parents, I use the polite form of the verb. But then I'm talking to my friend who's on my level, so I use the impolite or the not impolite, the casual ending of it.
And this is why I will never speak Korean.
Yeah. If you think this sounds like oh, it's too much, I'll just start like I'm just gonna get a book and memorize a bunch of words and just I'll just butcher my way through. What Kevin's describing here sounds really nuanced, but even in a basic Korean class, the classes that I've taken, it's kind of foundational. Like it's some of the first, some of the first verbs you're going to learn. You're going to learn like, and you need it because otherwise you can't hear what's going on around you. So you're going to need to know those differences. Like there's a different way to say eat, like just like he's describing.
I remember somebody saying to me, "Duseo," and I was just like, "Law, I don't know what that is. Like, I don't know what the word
Duseo
means.
is.
Does it mean I can start
polite
eating?"
Version. It's the polite version, and so that's again, you can use Duseo. You can use that verb with the polite ending because they're using it because you're above, so they're giving you respect by using that word, and they're also paying you respect because you're a customer or whatever. And they're adding the yo at the end. And so you can combine them both. I was just giving the example of a friend.
Yeah,
and
no,
Duseo,
I just
Duseo
only know
is
mokta
eat
as eat.
enjoy.
And so when someone said, you know, Duseo, eat, I didn't know the second word for the that had two words for the same meaning.
That's what that is.
And so,
Jack, you know this phrase, mashiki Duseo, right?
Delicious or whatever.
Enjoy your meal.
Enjoy,
it's enjoy your.
Yeah.
Well, what that is, it's mashike in deliciously, that it doesn't translate properly if you but mashike Duseo. Enjoy your meal, and they're saying Duseo, enjoy the meal Duseo. They're using that form. So that's what, like that one phrase that everyone learns, enjoy your meal, mashike Duseo. That means that's using that polite form of mokta. So you know this verb. You've heard it before.
Yeah,
it's there.
I'm it's just it is, like you said, just a mind bender though sometimes, like
but I mean, if we're going back to etiquette and trying to bring it back from language discussion.
Sorry,
no, you can't discuss etiquette without discussing language here. It's the way, like, because it all, so much of etiquette and so much of language and so much of culture in Korea is age-based, and language shows that, and the culture, the etiquette, the eating things, the way you act towards people on the street, a lot of it is age-based. You know, people are older than you, and I think Koreans, because of that, they see age more commonly than, and not more commonly, but they see it more clearly than you or I might.
Did you guys happen?
I was surprised at how specific that can be too. Like, my girlfriend is identical twin, and there's actual.
Is she the older or the younger one?
She's the older one. So so it's funny how there's even that has some consequence. Because the age is technically, one person's technically like a second, a few minutes or seconds, few seconds older than the other. Yeah, so there's consequence. I don't know why that. I mean, of course, because technically you're older. But for me, it's like, come on, you're so close. I mean,
it's such a technicality. It's just like, you can't. I didn't take my rice yet. I'm, don't even dare take a bite of that. I'm not. You could really mess with your twin, if you're the older one. If you're the younger one, it might be absolutely maddening.
I wonder how much they play with each other with that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, well, naming is a fantastic example, and this is from that article, right, Jack? Like, where they're talking about.
I was going to talk about the Squid Game, because it's absolutely on fire. Did you watch it?
No, I just downloaded it. Is it done? There's 9 episodes.
Yeah, something like that.
I just torrented it. So I'll try and watch it. I don't have Netflix, but it's on Pirate Bay as well. Sailing the high seas of the internet. So
I do not
it was an interesting article. Yeah. I do. Whatever. That's a whole different discussion of streaming services. There's just too many of them these days.
The crux of the article. This was written by this is David Tizard. He's also on some of the Facebook groups that I'm a member of, and so he comments every once in a while. Real knowledgeable guy when it comes to like language and culture and stuff. And he writes for the Korean Herald or Korean Times. Korean Times, right? I think it's the Times.
Shit.
If I'm wrong, David, I apologize profusely. I'm so sorry. I think it's Korea Times.
I think you're right. I'm but 90% sure.
They were talking about how writing about how the subtitles for these shows are getting much better. The translations, whereas it used to be, because you used to watch, for example, in the Squid Game, in the show, there's a moment where a character refers to a boss, an older boss, by just a name, which wouldn't mean anything in our culture, right? Because that's what we would call. That's like you, Kevin. You call me Jack. I call you Kevin. You don't call
Of
me,
course.
older Jack or Mr. Jack or whatever. I mean, it's just, we're all friends because we share similar interests. We work together. We're friends. It doesn't matter that I'm.
But if we were speaking Korean in the same situation, I would not call you Jack.
Right. It would be rude, right? I mean, that would be.
Yeah, I think in the course of it with friends, I don't know how rude it would be, but it would be awkward for sure.
Okay.
It might be rude depending on the situation. With friends, it might just be awkward. I'm not sure. It's just automatic. But yeah, that's something that for me honestly is still really tough. And actually, if you want to talk about, like, go back to language just a little bit more, I don't know how much you guys know. There's so many goddamned words for different family relationships in Korea, in Korean.
I gave up.
It's
I got about halfway through it. It's like, that's enough.
Even Korean people get confused from it because like in English, right, you've got, your parents have brothers and sisters, and every brother and sister and whoever they're married to, they're aunts and uncles, and it's just aunt name or uncle name, right? And that's it. It's aunts and uncles. In Korean, each aunt and each uncle has a different title, depending on if they're on their mom's side, depending on if they're on dad's side, depending on if they are the first, second, third, fourth of them, or depending then again, if they're the married into uncle or if they're the actual family uncle or aunt. And so that's confusing as hell. And then like I know I'm starting to get them still, but there's just so many damn names, and it's really
I
confusing.
love teaching this to my students because I'm just like, hey, guess what, everybody? What do you call your dad's mother? And they're like, grandmother. I'm like, yeah, that's good. What do you call your mom's mother? And then they're like, well, it can't be grandmother because I already said that one. I'm like, nope, it's grandmother. What do you call her husband? That's your grandfather. It's just like, we have one word for these because we, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's because we don't care about our family as much.
I think there's, but you use names.
We use names. So yeah. So like if instead of it being like your relationship to, like when you're speaking Korean, you're talking about your relationship to that person. And if you have no relationship, then it's going to be their status. Like it's basically any information you have about them is how you can refer to them. Like, so if you're seeing somebody and they're like, obviously this is your teacher, or it is a teacher, you're in a school building and the guy's got a tie on, you're just going to refer to him as a teacher. And I think like in general, Kevin, right? You just use teacher just to be respectful in general.
Yeah, actually, a little bit, if you want to go for an off topic, I've started studying Hanja just a little bit, just because it's interesting. Do you know sun sang neem, right? Neem is just like, that's just the honorific adding thing that you can add to anything. Sun sang literally means like born before me.
Oh, really?
That's what the Hanja means from it. And so, yeah, you just refer to someone that you don't know that's older than you as something mean because they're older than you. They were born before me. This is just a general title for person who's older than me. That's the Hanja. That's what it comes from. Sun means before, sang means birth. So it's before birth.
And then that same word is used for teacher as well. So that's kind of an interesting way to maybe consider how in Korea teachers are viewed. I feel coming from Chicago, I feel that, and this is maybe it's not even based on language anymore. Maybe this is just modern world, what it is. But I feel that teachers get a lot more respect here in general. Than if you're working in like a public high school in America. But that's probably not really offering much. I mean, that's, I feel like teachers in America have been kind of devalued in a lot of ways. I mean, that's a whole
true as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could,
by comparison, I think in Korea, it's definitely like teachers, I feel they're held in higher esteem.
Well, every 5 years there's an election in Korea, and one of the top 1 or 2 issues is education. Where would that be in American politics? Like,
unfortunately,
number 9 or 10. I mean, it's up there, but it's definitely not in the top. 4 or 5. I don't think.
Anyway,
but I'm sorry, I digress. Yeah.
So where were we on, like, naming?
Yeah, we're talking about family. We were just getting into a little bit of language, but if you guys wanted to shift to one more, aspect of etiquette that we missed, we talked about food, kind of drinking culture. We covered language. I'm trying to think of what we, did we miss anything?
There's etiquette of like, we talked a little bit about these things that are more traditional and constant, in the history of them. like the Confucianism that relates, but we haven't talked at all about the things that are really modern, like some of the differences I saw coming straight from Chicago to Busan. When I arrived, I was really surprised at, okay, everybody makes this joke, how clean the subways are, haha. But I mean, it is remarkable, especially coming from Chicago, and it's just what it is. But in addition to that, you don't see people in Korea very often walking down the street eating. That's just not really a thing. And you would see it definitely much more in Chicago. On public transit, you're not supposed to be eating on the trains and buses in Chicago, but I mean, I always would have my coffee and bagel before going to campus or to work or whatever. And plenty of people eat on the subway in Chicago. In Busan, no one, I would see really nobody is eating and talking loudly. People are like making phone calls and stuff on buses, on trains here, but it's way more muted than if you're in New York or Chicago. That's so muted.
Like, I used to get scolded a lot. I got scolded often for talking to my friend, you know, for like on the Korean subway, someone would say, "Hey, tone it down." I mean, I don't know what they said, and they said something in Korean, but I got the gist of it.
And I've adapted the behavior. So now when I'm on the bus, if I have to make a phone call, you know, I'll just be talking like this. And it's just, I don't decide to do that. I just do it. What's that?
That's an interesting one, because I think that I think that's a really common one that I've heard, like Korean people, when they complain about foreigners, like one etiquette thing like foreigners often do is that we're loud. That's one of the things. And that's just an interesting, like, when I'm on the subway, my wife tells me too, she's like, "You're so loud." I'm like, am I? Like, I don't consider myself loud. I don't think I'm speaking
My wife
loudly.
tells me I'm loud too. My voice is the equivalent of slurping noodles, you know, like I'm the slurping noodles.
And we've pulled it back around.
To Koreans, you know, what slurping noodles is to me. I don't know.
No,
I was on a bus last week, and there was a foreign couple, older couple, and they had two daughters. Look, they were twins as well. Two girls, and they're sitting in the two front seats in the bus. One girl is on each lap of each parent, and the girls are just making they're kids. They're like 4 years old, and they're making observations and everything. And the girls like just shouting, "It's a rainbow! Oh wow, fire truck!" Just like, you know, and the whole bus is just silent except for there's tons of people on this bus, and it's just these two kids like shouting their observations. And it struck me as like, whoa, they're so loud. And then I realized, I'm like, no, they're just kids. I mean, if I was in Chicago, that's normal.
Yeah.
But you know, the other Korean kids, they're not talking like that.
Yeah. There is. That's an interesting thing. Yeah, even for kids, I hadn't noticed it from that. But I have seen kids, of course. You know, I've seen mom and or dad and son or daughter on a bus, and they're still pointing those things out. Like, what's that? You know, it's a dog. What's that? That's a rainbow. But yeah, there's definitely a volume difference here. And yeah, I've been told multiple times that foreigners are loud. I've been told multiple times constantly that I'm loud. Like every, like, so common. It's still, I get told it. I just don't, like, I guess I do kind of hear it now, but at the same time, when I'm speaking, I don't feel it. I don't think you're loud.
I think it's also the fact that you're speaking a foreign language. It's jarring. It might be cloying to someone listening, you know, that doesn't understand it. And so
maybe, but I do think there is just a decibel difference, like just straight up.
I think there's a decibel difference. I gotta agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I
think too, like there is that feeling of like, when you hear someone, you know, foreigners are noisy. Well, it's, you can't, if you're listening to like, 20 different languages that you don't know, it's going to seem a little caustic to your ears and it gets a little tiring, fatigued because you can't understand the words. But I have to agree with Kevin with this. I really think the decibel level is a different sort of thing.
Okay. What about the sitting on the subway? You know, they have this like, giving up your seat for an elderly person. They've got seats, designated just for, I feel like people respect that more. I don't feel like that would be respected in Chicago necessarily. Am I wrong about that? I've never,
I don't actually know subways in big cities in the States. I can't.
Yeah,
compare.
I feel like if you saw like, obviously pregnant woman getting onto the train or or an elderly person and you didn't get up from your seat. When I left Chicago, there was no smartphones, so no one's really staring at their hands. So it's true. You're just much more aware. I've definitely seen that here in the subway, where it's a young kid. He's it could be a high schooler, and he or she is on their phone, and a little old grandma comes on with a cane, and they just don't notice. And then somebody will politely, like, probably, nudge the kid, like, yo, or what I've also seen is like someone who doesn't have like the priority seat. Like, I would do this. You just get up, like, take my seat. Right?
Yeah.
I love being the foreigner to give my seat to an old person, like, and then looking around at all the Koreans that didn't give it. I'm just like, yeah, that's right. I'm a good representative of the outsider people.
And you're virtue signaling.
Maybe
at the on the subway.
I don't do it for myself. I do it to make myself feel better. It's not actually for the.
It's interesting when you give your seat up to somebody and then they offer to hold your bag for you.
Oh yeah,
that's kind of a cool thing here that I've noticed.
Cool.
Which
I like
as a kind of like a paranoid American, I was like, I don't want to give my bag to somebody else, even though I know obviously they're not gonna take it, but. That's another.
Yeah, the first couple times I saw that, I had no idea why they were reaching for my bag to take it. I'm like, oh no, this is mine. I just gave you my seat. But yeah, no, that's an interesting one, right? Like holding it for you, like, because you're standing now, so they can put it on their lap.
Yeah, that's a cool one. That happened to me. I had an ukulele, and the old guy he reached for my ukulele. It was in a case and everything, and I'm like, is this like a crazy person? Is he gonna trying to pop a jam here? What's gonna oh crap? I give it to him. I'm like just cringing. I'm just getting ready for it. He just hugs it, looks away. I'm like,
yeah,
okay. I hope I'm getting that back.
You're like, this is mine now. Yeah, is that yours now?
Thank you for your seat and your ukulele.
Is that like that?
That's what's the how much I spent on the ukulele. I'm like, all right, that was like $100, but I get another one, I guess.
That's a funny one. That's a good example. I'm glad that came up.
You know what's annoying about this topic is that as soon as we're done with this podcast, we wrap it up, we're gonna think of 30 just primo examples of etiquette. But
well, I think this is a good kind of primer topic. We talked about we did go into depth a little bit on kind of all of these things, but this is something that we can think about. One, what topics do we want to expand, and for everyone listening out there, the things that we talked about tonight, what more do you want to know, right? We keep asking for emails. Well, here's something very specific. We touched on a bunch of random topics tonight. There's a lot more eating and drinking etiquette that we could list off. I could sit here for 15 minutes and make more. There's different etiquette for Subway that we didn't necessarily talk about. There's more language stuff that we could talk about, right? There's a lot of different things that we've just kind of touched on the surface for.
Even within the dating realm, we didn't even talk about that, or splitting the bill, going Dutch,
or Jim Joban. We didn't talk about sauna.
Yeah.
Oh, sauna. Yeah, there's sauna.
We might have to do a part two of this.
There might have to be a part.
Let's see what kind of feedback we get from our listeners out there, and if you guys, if they have some examples that you want to give, like some horror stories or something, we're happy to read those. Because I think we have all, messed up from time to time, and so those would be really fun to read.
That could be fun too.
So send an email. Do you guys want to? Should we wrap it up here? Do you guys feel good about this?
I think that's.
Okay. Now I've got my mind is flooded with a whole bunch of other ideas now. But
already.
Everybody, thank you for joining us tonight at the Soul Patch podcast. We are on all the major platforms, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you could find it in your heart to give us a positive review on Apple on the Apple Podcast or iTunes, that would really help us out. It gets us in the ears of more listeners. You can visit our website at thesoulpatch.com. Very easy to get there. If you, like I said, we really want to get some feedback from you guys, and we want to, talk about your stories as well. So send us an email at thesoulpatch@gmail.com. That's thesoulpatch, SEOUL. And you can also go to YouTube, and I'm starting to see the YouTube. There's a little more activity, some comments on YouTube. We're getting interaction with some of our listeners.
Yeah.
And so you can also comment on the video and just go, in the YouTube search bar and type in the Soul Patch podcast, and you'll go right to all of our videos. All 19 of them are up there. And, enjoy and make a comment, leave a comment. We'll write back to you and give us your ideas. We're happy to talk about those in future episodes. So
definitely.
Ryan, Kev, thanks a lot, guys. It was a great time again, as usual. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Cheers.
I like to pay a couple respects to the people that made me what I am today.
Nothing gear.
It's all my love. It's all my love.
The quiet man.
It's all my love. It's all my love.
Dopamine. Jim.
It's all my love. It's all my love. It's all my love.
The brain.
It's all my love. It's all my love.
Hey, Bobby.
Let the bass go.